Oh man, it's gonna be one of those videos, huh? What's going on, YouTube? Krono here, and welcome back to the channel. I didn't say I said my YouTube, said my fellow weaves. What is up, my fellow weaves? Welcome back to the channel. Krono here. We got a interesting video to go over today. We're actually doing a reaction to a video by someone I actually followed a long time ago, who got me into Bouncer to the very start. RITensei has made a video titled "The Bouncer Rework." This is to go along with their movement hashtag Save Bouncer. One thing I did say I wanted to do with my channel whenever I started to really push into it was to use my platform to help kind of signal boost things that I believe are important. And while it is important, personally believe when it comes to situations of class balance, I also do want to offer criticisms along with this as well, to help push the right narrative, I guess, right agenda. So here's how this is gonna go. We're gonna watch this through once, and then I'm gonna give my feedback and thoughts on the situation itself, and hopefully you guys enjoy my take and I hear what you guys have to say moving forward. But let's pop over to the video and let's get started. So I will be muting some of the audio in this video because there is some copyrighted music in the video as well. So you guys won't hear the copyrighted music. It'll be basically quiet, so it's gonna be kind of weird. But when it gets to the portions of talking and things like that, you guys will hear that. So let's go ahead and get started.
No, 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 no.
With the glass ceiling broken, all the oppressed groups shall prosper, especially the most oppressed group of all.
Bouncers.
Kai.
Just died.
Jokes and depression aside, these problems pretty much divided the crippled and already struggling player base that Bouncer has. This little reel had the purpose of highlighting the major issues of the December 6 patch, but there is a far bigger picture here. The patch ultimately fell tone deaf and failed to match over a year of actual problems with Bouncer, with some of them being literal clones of issues in previous patches returning. Our goal here is to get everyone on the same page for a Bouncer future that rewards all levels of play, casual and beyond, instead of pigeonholing changes that fit one part of a very limited player demographic. I think it bears repeating if those same players who rep your class consider quitting after a patch, and that is quite telling. That is why I, alongside some of the best bouncers on the game and the core of the community, is working on an initiative to put Bouncer on the right track with meaningful changes from people who actually analyze and play the class. This initiative will be dubbed hashtag Project Save Bouncer, which will kick off with an in-depth video explaining in insane detail how we got to this mess that we did and what SEGA can do and has shown that they're capable of doing to fix it with actual guided, meaningful feedback. They'll have to hear us if everyone is on the same page. It's high time we put our best boot and blade forward and forge a future that SEGA cannot possibly screw up this time. You game? We'll see you there in the upcoming video.
Okay, so quite a bit to unpack here when it comes to this video. So first and foremost, I want to be very clear about this, and I want to make sure this is the front or the very beginning of this video. I have the utmost respect for RITensei as a player. They are part of the reason why I learned Bouncer way back when I did. If I'm thinking of the same person, I'm pretty sure it was the same guy who wrote the Bouncer guide. Apologies if it isn't. Feel free to correct me in the comments below. The person who wrote the Bouncer guide back in base game that I did watch and I did go through. And I read from top to bottom, actually, and learned a lot about the class. So if that is, appreciate you. Thank you very much. But a few things, and they mentioned this as well, and I'm gonna kind of touch on these things as we go across, because as someone who well, my day job has a lot to do with conversations with individuals pretty much consistently, and a lot of times it's a lot of getting people to listen to what I'm saying. I've personally been cued into certain things that not everyone else is always cued into, and it just helps to understand things from a different perspective. One thing is when we're looking at something like this, and it's kind of, and again, this is not so much this was the intention of the video, but this is what it felt like when you were watching the video itself. This kind of came across by putting a bunch of memes at the very beginning of this, is that all of this was basically a joke. And while, meme or jokes aside, so on and so forth, they're meant to be funny. When we're looking at something like as serious as at least as serious as someone wants to make it sound, right? As massive changes and reworks and balances and things of that sort. It is important, in my opinion, that your audience is what you need to think about whenever you're doing this sort of thing. It's people like to always mention that, if I said something a specific way and you took it that way, it's your fault that you took it that way. But it's also technically up to the person who's saying it and how they explain it or how they actually said it. And I feel like this falls a little bit flat when we look at something like, calling Sega out for, the patch being a bit tone deaf to the problems of Bouncer. Now, granted, I'm not saying that the issues that people have shown off that, that exist right now aren't valid. A very big part of it is jet boots. Jet boots are something that now are basically reduced to 3 buttons, which is pretty terrible, all things considered. You want to be able to use your entire kit. That makes things fun. However, it's also worth mentioning that 80% of people have no idea of this. Most people that really didn't, or that even knew about, it being reduced to 3 buttons, only knew about it because the top end players basically yelled that, hey, only 3 buttons are worth pressing. Everything else is basically a throw. They then found out about it, and now all of a sudden, they're playing boots either suboptimally or they're not having fun playing them anymore by pressing 3 buttons. And it's worth mentioning that when you have a rework or a renewal, as they say, I think Sega did that on purpose, right? I think they specifically used the word renewal instead of rework, because rework gives kind of like the idea of an entire overhaul, when that doesn't feel like that's what this was. It feels like it was like a reshifting or a refocusing of the class, with making specific changes back to similarities of previous, of base PS2, very similar to what things were back in base PS2 in a lot of ways. And we're going to talk about that in a moment here. But it is something that it's worth mentioning that, yeah, when the top end players are looking at quitting, it's worth saying that it only was the top end players that were looking at quitting. So realistically, it might not have been as impactful as you might want it to sound. It's a situation where, yes, it's important that those who are pushing your class the absolute limit are enjoying themselves while doing it, and it's how the class should be played, so on and so forth. But it's also worth mentioning the impact of a change when it only affects at most 5% of the player base. And it's something that you have to be mindful of whenever you're trying to get a point across, because if it only affects 5% of the player base and you look at it as being a very impactful thing and it being super important, it comes off as the only 5% of the player base is what actually matters. And that's not what this message is trying to say. At least I'm pretty sure it's not what it's trying to say, but that's what it ends up sounding like. And that breeds the wrong sort, and at least in my opinion, the wrong sort of message in this situation. Now, looking at the whole movement hashtag save bouncer also, I feel like is a bit overhyped. I'm trying to think of the right word in the situation. It's a bit over dramatic. I can't think of another word, but it feels a bit over dramatic. Realistically, this movement, in my opinion, should be hashtag shave jet boots. Because soaring blades outside of a bug feels fine. It feels great, actually. Outside of a bug and a piece of tech that shouldn't exist, I'll say, it feels fantastic. Outside of just delete BAPs and fix the issues with the weapon action breaking the tech arts, which, forgive my French, I have no better way of saying this. No shit, fix bugs. Of course, bugs need to be fixed. Fix the tech arts customization bug. That is not that big of a deal. It's just fix the bug itself. Bugs should be fixed for any classes. That's just how that should work. But to say that it kind of felt tone deaf, ironically feels kind of tone deaf, because there's a vast majority of players that are coming back to play the game, that are picking up Soaring Blades, that are playing Bouncer right now, that are having an absolute blast, myself included. Now, granted, I'm purposely trying to ignore the issues as well, because it takes away from the fun that I'm having, but I'm doing that internally, not externally. We're still talking about the problems, right? We're still mentioning them. They're still up there. There's something that we're going to talk about in our overall video when we talk about all the, talk about Bouncer and all of its changes and everything else that's going through. Like for Soaring Blades, we still have one more video to cover that, but I was waiting on the frame data before we do that. So it is worth mentioning those things, right? Like it's important to make sure you don't completely ignore them, but to ignore the vast majority of the player base having an absolute blast playing this class does maybe it wasn't intended to be, right? Maybe we weren't intended to feel like it, or it wasn't intended to come across like you're ignoring the vast majority of the player base, but it feels like the only place that we're looking at is that top 1%. And I don't want that to be the message that's coming across, because it even feels like when you go further into this, RITensei even says like, across all skill levels. So across everyone playing the class, right? So the intention is for everyone to enjoy themselves, not just for like, the top or the bottom, but the way this was presented was that, hey, the top end are quitting because of how awful some things are in the class, and SEGA can't figure this out. So we have to tell them how to do this. And if we're all on the same page and we're all saying the same stuff, then they'll have to listen to us. And what we're saying at the top percent is what the right thing is. That's how it feels, and that's how it comes across. So hopefully that's not what the message was here. That's kind of how it felt to me when I was going through this video originally. I feel like that's also how it's going to feel to some others that are out there. Right now, everyone seems to be on the same page. We're liking the video. That's awesome. I'm right here for it. It's definitely important to mention that there's a wider space to this, but it also just feels a little over dramatic to say #SaveBouncer, as if Bouncer is drowning right now, as if Bouncer is the one class that has everything going wrong. Maybe before the rework, I'd be with it. But after this renewal, I say rework, but after this renewal, it feels like #SaveJetBoots, man. It doesn't feel like #SaveBouncer. It feels like #SaveJetBoots. Also, hey, fix the bugs. Like that's what it feels like. And hey, maybe fix the bugs is a part of #SaveBouncer. Sure. But to me, that's a no shit Sherlock forehead moment. So that's how I look at it personally. Maybe you don't, maybe we're different in that situation. That's totally fine. But that's how it feels. And I don't want everyone looking at this to think that that's how bouncers feel overall, is that, this is where it needs to be saved. And this is the only way that it can happen, because a lot of things feel really good. And one thing that made me realize a vast difference in just what I should be doing was like adapting to some of the changes, man. Like one thing I've personally noticed is like, after I kind of got with what I thought felt good versus what I thought was the optimal thing, like when I went with what felt good, I noticed a vast improvement overall in my general quality of life when playing the class. I saw things like watching my damage creep up over 2K, 4.4, 4.5K in situations where I was even dealing without a ranger, like without being able to get a hold of some of those stronger classes to buff my damage. When I stopped focusing on BAPs, when I stopped, pushing, or when I stopped trying to push the use of a specific tech arts customization, like I started to see my damage increase. So I feel like there is something to be said about what changes we have currently. That isn't to say there aren't problems. And I think Bouncer would definitely benefit from having some of those changes looked at. I think it's fantastic to see that players are still passionate about the class, that want to provide meaningful feedback. But it's important to remember that meaningful feedback is from more than just the top echelon. It's from the entire community. And yeah, we should all be on the same page, but that doesn't mean that one side is weighted heavier than the other. And if only one side of this is affected heavily, then it's worth thinking that maybe one side of this might be pushing it a bit too far. That's just my take on the situation itself. I'm for hashtag save jet boots personally. I kind of like where Soaring Blades is going. There are some things I'd love to see changed. BAPS should be dead in my opinion. Get rid of it. Just let us counter and let it be done with. And fix the bug that we're dealing with currently when it comes to weapon action turning off tech arts customization. Outside of that, I think Soaring Blades is actually fantastic. Maybe there's some other thing that I'm going to learn from watching these videos that I didn't know about that's horrifically broken. Oh yeah, also there's this thing with our gap close. Pheasant causes us to it actually has vertical tracking now. Problem is the vertical tracking is too sensitive. That literally even where we're standing on the ground and the target is on the ground, if that target box is a little too high, we actually start like tracking it upward instead and go through the target and up above it, which is kind of weird. That also needs to be fixed too. But outside of that, everything's feeling great. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you guys really feel like there's a lot of issues with Soaring Blades? I feel like there hasn't been. Not to the point where hashtag save bouncer should be the proper hashtag. Now, jet boots, on the other hand, shouldn't be 3 buttons. Things need to be scaled. Things need to be adjusted. It should be using your entire kit. You should be feeling the same way that Soaring Blades feels right now. And while, yes, when you look at it now, jet boots is Jet Sweep Jolt has become Vinto all over again. It's even worse because if you look at Jolt, it's now worse Vinto plus rapid boost mixed in. But it is something that definitely we can see some change that need to happen. All right, guys, I can ramble on forever, and I have rambled on too long. It's a 3-minute video that has now gone to 17 minutes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe. We're going to keep with more. And we'll definitely be following this very, very closely. I'll be checking out a lot of this stuff. So I'm ready to see what truly needs to be changed with Bouncer, and I'm ready to push it up there if we're on the same page. Anyway, take care, my friends. Peace out.